used against you in a court of law. All right, let's see. Starting recording. All right. Today is Thursday, April 7th. You are here at Microsoft Office Hours. I am one of your hosts. My name is Heather Cox, and with me today are two other hosts and our consigliere who's, oh, he just disappeared. Our two other hosts. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Victoria.
Hey, I'm Garrett.
Awesome. And Garrett, I will let you introduce, since you are the man who brought us this amazing team of peers of ours. Go ahead and introduce them, and then we can kick the show over to them.
My pleasure, Heather. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. So I am super excited to introduce Eric Orman, Robert Nishi, and Sam Tulimat from the Windows 365 product group to talk to us about Cloud PC or Windows 365. So excited for these three gentlemen to be with us today. They have extensive EDU experience, so we're really excited that they're willing to spend the afternoon with us today. Eric, I'll turn over to you for a brief intro.
Quick unmute. Yeah, my 2-year stint in EDU, I ended up last July going back to engineering. It was a 2-year sabbatical. And so I went back to engineering and landed in the Windows 365 engineering team. And so I've been there, and slowly awesome people start following me, like Sam and Robert and a few others. And so Robert, who followed me around a couple of different times. In fact, he just lives literally across the street from me. Like if I went up onto my roof, I could see his house.
You could.
He's so close. So fun times with that one. So how about we turn it over to you, Sam, do an intro.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. So as Eric and Garrett has said, I have also come from the EDU world. I was working on Intune EDU for about 3 years, and I've worked with many customers that, some of you might be actually on the call, New York City Department of Education, Toronto District School Board. And so I've gotten, firsthand experience in education, and recently moved to Windows 365 team, working on the product side, as well as, hopefully over time, focusing more and more of our energy on education as we progress as a product. So that's a big part of my focus, hopefully going forward. And cool. Robert, I'll hand it to you. We're actually in the same room. Imagine that. It's like
it happens.
It's not something that happens often these days. Yeah.
I couldn't stand being too close to Eric down the street, so I decided to come into the office today. I am Robert, and much like the both of them, I also do come from working in the education side of things over the last few years, and recently moved over to Windows 365. Debatable whether it's a following Eric thing or not, but soon we'll figure things out. Part of what I got to do in the education side, especially with Endpoint Manager, Config Manager, Intune, was working directly with customers in deploying, getting Windows, iOS, Android devices up and managed, getting it into a good state. Especially in the start of the pandemic, it was one of those things that really needed to take off, and it, happy enough to be able to get in and work with a lot of customers that way, both K-12 and higher ed. And as we explore, I think especially the three of us came over to the Windows 365 team, it's one of those things that's really stuck with us. Is education is a very special space for us. And we want to make sure that we are understanding uniquely what defines this type of product for a space like education, whether it be higher ed or K-12. So really excited to be able to share with you where we are today with Windows 365, and also to get some feedback in terms of what could work better, or what are some of the things that you guys would like to see in the future. Can't say near future necessarily, but at least in the future, so that we can start thinking about this the right way.
Cool.
I'm good.
Great. So with that, I think I can sort of move us towards the next step. So we were hoping to do two things. One is I'm going to just assume that everyone hasn't heard about Windows 365 and what it is, and I'm just going to try to cover very few slides that gives you sort of an overview of what the product is. And then I think, because as you know, showing is much better than telling. We're going to just move very quickly to demo, and Robert is going to show you how to set up a Cloud PC, Windows 365, as well as quick login experience. And in the meantime, questions, feel free to drop in the chat. And even if we don't get to them today, would love to hear from you. So let me just share my screen quickly, and then we can get going. So I hope that folks can see my screen.
Yep.
Great. So if you haven't heard about Windows 365 before, I want to sort of start with what is Windows 365. And really, the best way we can sort of describe it is it's a PC in the cloud. So it's a cloud PC that enables you to essentially put a user to have their entire PC experience to be running from a essentially cloud-based technology that is hosted by Microsoft in Azure. So whatever it is that you're purchasing, let's say it's a machine that has 2 vCPUs and X number of RAMs, you're actually purchasing a machine that is run by us in the cloud, but we're actually providing to your user a full experience as if they're, essentially logging into their machine on an actual physical device. And so because of that, the way we've designed the product has been sort of with a vision of this is an extension of what Windows is today, but enabling you to sort of move it wherever you are and also have a better way to sort of have access to more compute that you may not have access to on a physical device. And a huge part of what we've done as a team is we've focused on keeping that experience fairly consistent with what you get on a Windows PC today. We focused on making the management and the provisioning of that super easy. So we have it all built into Microsoft Endpoint Manager for an enterprise. We also have some specific, integration into the Microsoft 365 admin console for allowing also a business admin that doesn't own an Endpoint Manager to set this up fairly quickly. And obviously, because you treat it as a cloud PC, exactly the same that you treat a PC, you do the same exact thing from a management perspective on this cloud PC that you do on a PC. So the idea here is that we're not essentially adding more technology or solutions or thinking that you have to do to deploy this technology in your university or organization. We are allowing you to leverage what you already use and then just be able to get set up quickly. So a lot of this will be so much easy and clear once you see the demo. And I think that the next thing I just kind of want to highlight a little bit here is, from a management perspective, obviously, whenever you provision a cloud PC to a user, you've got the apps, the settings that you can deploy today in Intune. It is absolutely hardware agnostic. I see the question. And that's a really huge part of the reason why this product actually came together, for hybrid work, for thinking about this moment that we're in where users are not always actually accessing the same machine that they're accessing. So it's, extending things that, in a general world you may hear about as virtualization, which, it is, right? A lot of the technologies that is used in these spaces is, but the way we've thought of it is much more sort of evolution and integration into the Windows experience that you have today. So let me talk a little bit about just the additions that we have, and I want to make a comment about higher ed and education in general. So today, what we have in the market is 2 editions for our product, Windows 365 Business, Windows 365 Enterprise. I spoke a little bit about Windows 365 Business. You can actually, it's super, if you go try it, it's incredibly easy and like within 5 minutes to provision a cloud PC to a user and get them set up. You don't need anything, no licensing prerequisites, no nothing. And it assumes that the customer here does not have to have any IT experience to be able to use it. So this is targeted primarily at smaller businesses today as we go. And then Windows 365 Enterprise is where we've built in a lot of the integration into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And that's where you do have to have Azure AD and have some licensing requirements. And that's where all of our sort of richer level of controls are. And so for a higher ed world, I think the comment that I want to make is this is a new product and market. I think, we shipped in the summer, essentially. That was our GA date. So what we came out with is our first sort of iteration of what this product is going to be. But we really our vision is to extend this into as many spaces as essentially possible to allow people that flexibility. And higher ed, as well as K through 12 with time, is definitely a huge target for us. We haven't really, built any higher ed focused yet licensing or, specific features. But I think that part of what we're hoping here is to start the conversations of, well, if you have considered Windows 365, what has stopped you today? How can we make it better? How can we, over time, hopefully have more targeted education features specifically for our product? So with that, I'm going to give it over to Robert, and we're hoping to essentially show you two things. One, how do you set up a Cloud PC? And we're going to show you that within Microsoft Endpoint Manager. That is actually probably you'll see how easy it is. That probably the more complicated way to set it up, right, versus business, but it's super, super easy. And then we'll show you, what's a login experience for a user looks like. And one thing that I want to really emphasize while Robert gets set up is actually, I think a big part of what's really important to understand here is the way that we've set up the product is you can bring in your own infrastructure, right? You can set it up, but part of what we're trying to do here is to actually help customers who have been in this space for a long time and have had to set up so much infrastructure to be able to enable a solution like this, to do it with us essentially doing everything for them. So part of what you'll see is there's an experience with Azure AD where you can essentially, even if you don't have, a local network or any of the requirements that you usually hear about in a virtualization setup, that you can actually get set up and running without having to know anything about all of the stuff. And that's the hope, is how we can expand sort of access to this technology for more people.
Cool beans. I've been messing around a little bit with like the whole side-by-side view thing. So here we are. So you can see me, not that you want to, but here we are. For those of you who are familiar with Microsoft Endpoint Manager, or what was previously Microsoft Intune, of course, MEM, right? Microsoft Endpoint Manager as a whole includes Intune, Windows Autopilot, Configuration Manager, and the likes. But here we are in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Intune console. So this will be your home landing page. Windows 365, if you've noticed in your tenant, if you already have one, kind of is in the node under devices where it literally says provisioning in Windows 365. So this is where we're going to go take a look at in a few seconds. What you'll notice is that I already have a few Windows devices. One is a physical device, so an Intune managed physical device, and I have a couple of Cloud PCs that have already been pre-provisioned. So that'll be the sort of login experience that we'll take a look at a little bit later. Getting a Cloud PC provision is fairly simple, but we can take a look once we get to the Windows 365 node here, some of the information that you'll be provided very quickly. All connections are healthy. So what this particularly means is we talked a little bit about bringing your own network. So versus using our networks living in Azure. But for the connections that are associated with your on-premises network, what has now been labeled Azure Network Connection is in a healthy state. So that's what that is all about here, stuff that I've set up before. Like I said a little bit before, Cloud PCs that are already here. You also notice that there's a few users associated that says not provisioned. And I can click on this to tell you what exactly that means. And I'll literally just read it out. This Cloud PC is in a not provisioned state. This means the user has been assigned a Windows 365 license, right? So that'll be the requirement for the user to be able to access Cloud PCs. They'll obviously need a license assigned, But even if they're licensed, if they're not provisioned with a policy to get this thing set up and running, this will be the state that you will see. So the entire process here is for you to be able to take a look at what that simplified setting looks like, or getting that policy set up looks like. So I'll just do edu setup as a name. Hybrid Azure AD join or Azure Active Directory join, standalone essentially, are the two choices that we have. Obviously, when it says Hybrid Azure AD join, it means that it'll be creating a situation where the user and the device, right, the Cloud PC, are going to be both in the cloud and also on premises AD. This is how we initially created Windows 365 as a service. More recently, and Eric's on the call here, his team worked on making sure that the availability is so that there is no reliance heavily on the on-premises network, and you can actually just do an Azure AD join only situation. So for this purpose, I will get that set up because it's a little bit quicker and easier. Sam mentioned a little bit earlier, you can actually bring your own network and or use our own network, or use our network here. Well, that's what I'll do here. Azure AD join. Some of the other simplified things that we put in here is making sure that we have an ability to just define which operating system is going to be pushed out. But not only that, so that'll be in the gallery images. Not only that, also to have your Office applications pre-installed as part of that deployment and that provisioning. And that's a big part of, whether it is physical devices that you push out there. Sometimes you have to do imaging and or pushing the Office applications as part of the deployment, whether you're doing that through Autopilot or you're using provisioning packages. This is all kind of encompassed in saying, just make a selection. So right now, Windows 11 Enterprise, Microsoft 365 apps, make a selection, and that's literally it, right? There are other options here. You're looking at some of the breakdown of how many CPUs, RAM, storage, things of that nature. And that's it. You do have an option, as you saw a little bit earlier, to have a custom image in there. We typically recommend gallery images just because it is defined and it's easy to understand what's in there. But on a needs basis, certainly custom images can become a necessity. One of the core things that was a reason was typically because for each language pack. So let's say if you are in Canada, for example, and say in Quebec, it might be both English, Canada, and French, Quebecois. And both of those things need to be in there. Rather than having to create a custom image, now you have the ability to sort of define what those things are. For this instance, I'll just say French Canada. And essentially what we've done is Windows 11 Enterprise, Microsoft 365 apps, right? The Office apps, and the French language defined as part of what's going to be configured in this process. The last bit is making sure that it's being assigned. So we looked at a little bit earlier that there was a user that was licensed for it, but not yet provisioned. That meant that this provisioning policy has not been applied. That user happens to be Dr. Martin, that lives in the School of Medicine faculty group. So have a selection there. Click on next. And that's essentially it. So that was the name. We're making sure that the Cloud PC that we're setting up here is just doing an Azure AD join, lives only in Azure, does not report back or create any objects back into your on-premises network. Windows 11 Enterprise with Office installed, 21H2 here, and with the French language pack pre-installed. Create, added the policy. Of course, what that means now is that the provisioning process has begun. So if you look back here, hopefully in a few seconds, you'll start to see this will turn into, oh yeah, it has turned into already provisioning. So that process has begun. Now, rather than having you wait for that process, let me see if I can. And I'm going to take a look and see if I can log on here with a different user first. Hold on 1 second, sign out. Refresh. And as I do that, you can ask questions. Hopefully, if there are people looking, you can.
Yeah, feel free to, I mean, I've been trying to answer the chat, but if there are, folks who want to come off mute and ask a question, feel free. And then I think in a second, we can show you the user experience.
See if I can get on here with a different.
And one thing I'd love to do in the future, I know we're doing this demo today and kind of giving you a general idea, but obviously, like, we would love to have a discussion over time, and that's specifically sort of an area of focus for me in terms of some future work that we're doing in the space of, hey, if you got specifically higher ed today, what type of scenarios would you see yourself using Windows 365? And, you know, what types of sort of pieces would you need to be able to, you know, adopt it in higher ed? As I said, we're kind of starting to work through the education space more. And so we're definitely very interested in hearing from people over time if, you know, they tried or piloted or thought about it, what kind of scenarios specifically for your users you see yourself using it.
Awesome.
All right, here we go.
What I have pre-provisioned, again, because what we've done is created something completely new. Rather than French Canada, I have this one as JJP, so that's Japan Japanese as a language pre-provisioned. To hit on briefly though, this is the windows365.microsoft.com, which just went GA yesterday, I believe, right? We were talking a little bit earlier about being platform agnostic. We have the ability to get into the same cloud PC from your Windows desktop, right? From Mac, from an Android device, from an iOS, iPadOS device. Absolutely, the experience is agnostic. The experience we'll show you right now is also, addition to that, is the browser experience. So regardless of which platform you're on, if you can get here from your browser, that's absolutely what you're going to experience. Very quickly, it'll say in session settings, printer, microphone, clipboard, all those things, are they going to be accessible? You can say don't ask, show again, but we'll say yes to those things. We'll have a connection here. I've already obviously logged in as the user. And right now, we do have to do this login process. We're working on a way to make sure that we don't have to do that every single time. But that's one of those things that's sort of work in progress type of things. So here is your Cloud PC that's in the cloud. Now, I can log into this session here on this browser. I can, if I had the same credentials or Eric had the same credentials and I decide, hey, Eric, go ahead and log in there, essentially, he'll be able to continue off where I left off. Or if I was, that's not a good example because I wouldn't be the same user, right? But the idea is if I were to get on a iOS or iPad device here with me and logged in with the same user, I would essentially pick up where I left off. So I could start doing some things here. Well, you'll also notice too, everything is in Japanese. In case you can't read Japanese, trust me, that is Japanese. But if I were to open up the session of working with stuff in Word here, right? Oh, obviously launching for the first time. Logged in as, this is my wife, by the way. So it's okay. I promise. Let's see if I can do the same thing by, I'll keep this open. How do I stop sharing? I'm going to go to, hopefully, remote desktop. Oh, I don't have it installed on this one. Of course, that happens. But the idea is that if I were to log into from a different machine, as long as it's the same Cloud PC that I'm logging into, the experience is going to remain the same. So rather than a normal thing client situation, if you're logging off and logging back on, it starts the session over again. You're effectively able to now continue the process no matter where you are, logging in from whatever device, because the login to device that you're getting into is actually the same thing. Like it's the same physical device, right? But it's just in the cloud.
I want to just answer some of the questions that came in the chat because I think some of them are useful, and I think we're probably at a point where we can move to answering questions in general.
Absolutely.
So there was a question about Teams.
Eric, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I see. Eric.
You're muted though.
No, go ahead, answer the teams, and then I'll come
Yeah,
back.
I just wanted to answer the team's question here. So someone asked, does team work the same in Windows 365, audio, video, screen share? So we have, this is a huge area of investment for us. You will see that we're shipping features to support teams on Windows 365 every other week, essentially. So we've come a long way, and I would say that we don't have full feature parity yet in terms of Teams versus a physical PC, but we are absolutely working to get there. And a ton of the features that you might have mentioned already that were not supported are supported today. So I would say check it out, see how much we've sort of added in that space. Eric, feel free to jump in. I think you had wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to kind of caveat on something that Scott had said, and he says an old idea renewed, and kind of, sort of, yes, but simplified. That's the real key. We're a SaaS service. So think of, you're like, okay, well, there's AVD and there's remote desktop and there's Citrix, and the easiest way that I like to relate Windows 365 to is what Exchange Online did for Exchange. Everyone knows pretty much the pain and frustration of deploying Exchange on-prem, or kind of config manager would be another one in relating that to Intune. Is it takes a lot of infrastructure. You got to deploy the servers, you got to get the servers, you got to deploy the OS on top of it, backup solution, user profile, all of this stuff. It's a headache. It was a team to do all of that. And then when you go to Exchange Online, the beauty and simplicity of simply just assigning a license and flipping that little switch over enables a full mailbox. And so that is what Windows 365 is like. You assign a license to a user. And that license, there's 12 different types of licenses based upon a 4-core or an 8-core. So it's basically the size of the engine. But after you assign a license to a user, you create a provisioning profile. And we basically ask you 4 questions. And you don't need an Azure subscription. You could bring an Azure subscription if you want to, but you don't even need one. We ask you, basically, what type of domain join, Azure AD join or hybrid Azure AD join? We ask you which region, that's your Azure region. I think there's 14 that we support. I don't know, it's documented. But what Azure region? So the location of your Cloud PC. Then we ask you another question around what type of image, gallery or custom. We like to use gallery images because it's very synonymous with when we think about provisioning of a Cloud PC, the same as autopilot. With an autopilot, you don't use custom images. You use a gallery, you use a vanilla image that you get from your OEM. And when that device arrives, you boot up, you sign in, Intune and autopilot transforms that device by layering on apps and settings and configurations. We think of the provisioning of a Cloud PC in the exact same process. You pick the gallery image, and then the next thing is we ask you like a language. And then after that, we do the provisioning. And so we orchestrate the creation of the Cloud PC, we domain join it in the region, we install the language pack if you want to, and then MEM powers all of Windows 365 Enterprise. So then everything you target, all your existing apps and settings and configurations, just simply layer on. And so at the end state, your user logs into a device that's fully configured by IT. And so the provisioning paths of Windows 365, we think of them as exactly the same as like autopilot. Very, very similar in nature. So Windows 365 is SaaS. It's simple. We've taken the complexities out. You don't need to have a lot of the overhead like you would with AVD or Citrix or those other things. So when you think of Windows 365, first thing I want you to think about is simple. And it is that simple. And so if anybody on this call needs a trial license, work with Heather and Garrett and Victoria, and we can get you trial licenses so you can try this all. So that's that's our commitment to you in terms of that.
We have one. Oh, sorry. I was going to say we have one hand raised. Do we have time for one quick question?
Yeah.
Is that good? All right, you can come off of mute.
Looks like my 3's trying to come off mute.
Yes, there you are.
Okay. I am not able to message you because I'm driving. I just wanted to ask you, this Cloud PC, the image, like how we do in a SCCM or Intune, the packages. It's like I feel like Windows PC is like a repository that you are giving. If you are building a new PC, you are just copying that image to that new PC. Hello.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. I'm sorry.
No, I am asking, like, most probably I am also like not understanding. I'm just asking Windows 365, you told we can do it in Intune. I am just asking, is it a repository of all the license in one PC and you do the images how we do in SCCM packages?
Fundamentally the same. Basically, we orchestrate the creation of the Cloud PC. And so when you want to, you can use co-management also if you want to co-manage your, but it does require Intune. So it needs to be in a co-managed state if you want as config manager. So if you want to deploy your config manager applications or task sequences, you could certainly do that to your Cloud PC. We think about a Cloud PC and managing it the exact same way as a physical PC. So all of your settings and applications and configurations that you would target towards a physical PC are applicable to your Cloud PC. There's just some super capabilities that you get with the Cloud PC because it's hosted and running in Azure. So you're going to get faster networking, you get point-in-time restore, you get the ability to resize. So that's a cool feature where you could be using a 4-core and you could resize it to an 8-core. Can't do that on your Surface device. So there's some incredible superpowers that they have also in addition to it. But fundamentally, think of all the capabilities that you have today on a physical PC you would have, but in a more simplified way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for those of you that have come today. I'm going to stop the recording.